What if I told you the 2008 financial crisis wasn't an accident? It was a math problem that was designed to fail. The official story is that homeowners were irresponsible and banks got greedy. That is a lie designed to protect the guilty. File 92.4 reveals that the crash was a structural transfer of wealth, orchestrated by men who moved seamlessly from the CEO suites of Wall Street to the Treasury Department of the United States. By the end of this file, you won't just know what happened in 2008. You will understand the specific financial traps like negative amortization, synthetic CDOs, and the credit default swap that destroyed the global economy. And most importantly, you will see why the exact same mathematical signals have just appeared again this morning in the commercial real estate market. The crash didn't end, it was just paused, and the pause button is about to be released. To understand the robbery, you have to read the contract. The weapon used to destroy the American homeowner wasn't just a loan. It was a specific product called the adjustable rate mortgage, or Option ARM. In the 1990s, getting a mortgage required proof of income, a down payment, and a credit score. But by 2004, Wall Street's appetite for mortgage bonds had become insatiable. They ran out of qualified borrowers, so they invented a new category called subprime. This era gave birth to the ninja loan. No income, no job, no assets. Companies like Countrywide Financial, led by Angelo Mazzillo, started aggressive marketing campaigns. They targeted immigrants, the elderly, and the working poor. Millions of Americans were sold 228 loans. The pitch was seductive. Pay a teaser rate of 1% or 2% for the first 2 years. A house that should cost $3,000 a month suddenly cost $1,000. It made the American dream look affordable to people who made less than minimum wage. But the contract had two poison pills buried in the fine print. First, negative amortization. In many of these loans, the 1% payment didn't even cover the interest. The unpaid interest was added to the loan balance. You would make payments every month, but your debt would actually grow. Second, the reset. In month 25, the rate would jump to the LIBOR index plus a margin, often 8% or 10%. Your payment didn't just go up, it tripled overnight. The bankers knew it was mathematically impossible for a strawberry picker to pay the reset rate. So why did they lend the money? Because they taught their sales teams a specific lie: refinancing. Viewers, this is the lesson you must learn today. The entire scheme relied on the assumption that home prices would never fall. The bankers told clients, don't worry about the reset or the negative amortization. In 2 years, your house will be worth more and you can just refinance into a new loan with a new teaser rate. It was a Ponzi scheme where the profit was your own home's inflated value. But in 2006, the music stopped. Home prices flattened and then began to fall. Suddenly, the house was worth less than the loan. When borrowers went to refinance to escape the reset, the banks said no. To make matters worse, many loans had prepayment penalties, locking victims into the burning building. The trap snapped shut. You might ask who would buy these toxic loans. Why would pension funds in Iceland and insurance companies in Germany buy billions of dollars of debt from people who couldn't pay it back? Because of a fatal flaw in the financial system known as the issuer pays model and the invention of the CDO. Here is how the machine worked. The banks took thousands of toxic loans and put them into a blender called a collateralized debt obligation, or CDO. They sliced this toxic mixture into layers called tranches. The top layer, or senior tranche, was paid first. The bottom layer, the equity tranche, took the losses first. By doing this, they claimed they had turned lead into gold. They took risky loans and magically created a safe bond. But to sell it, they needed a stamp of approval. Enter the rating agencies, Moody's, S&P, and Fitch. These agencies are the referees of the financial world. But there was a conflict of interest. The rating agencies are paid by the banks creating the bonds. If Moody's refused to give a pile of toxic subprime loans a AAA rating, the bank would simply take their business and their millions in fees down the street to S&P. It was corruption by design. Employees at S&P later testified that they were pressured to rate deals as AAA, even when their own models showed a 50% chance of default. One analyst wrote in an email, "We would rate a deal structured by cows if it paid us." But Wall Street didn't stop at selling bad loans. They wanted to gamble. This brings us to the most dangerous weapon of all, the synthetic CDO and the credit default swap. This is the chapter history books often skip, but it is the reason the crisis went global. Banks like Goldman Sachs and Deutsche Bank realized the housing market was going to crash, but they had run out of actual mortgages to bet against. So they created synthetic CDOs. These were bets on bets. They didn't contain actual home loans. They were just side bets referencing other bonds. To make these bets pay off, they used something called a credit default swap, or CDS. Think of it like buying fire insurance on your neighbor's house. You don't own the house, but if it burns down, you get paid. Wall Street banks bought billions of dollars in credit default swaps, effectively betting that the American housing market would burn to the ground. But who was selling this insurance? Who was promising to pay up if the world ended? AIG, the American International Group, the world's largest insurance company. AIG sold trillions of dollars in protection against a housing crash. They collected millions in premiums and booked it as pure profit. Their models said a nationwide housing crash was impossible. They were wrong. When the bonds started failing, AIG suddenly owed hundreds of billions of dollars to Wall Street banks, money they didn't have. This created a web of destruction. If housing fell, the bonds failed. If the bonds failed, AIG went bankrupt. If AIG went bankrupt, Goldman Sachs and everyone else wouldn't get paid. The entire system was wired to explode together. When the homeowners started defaulting, the dominoes began to fall. The first major domino was Lehman Brothers. Lehman was operating with a leverage ratio of 31-1. This means for every $1 of their own money they held, they borrowed $31 to bet on housing. This is the math of suicide. At 31-1 leverage, a mere 3% drop in the value of your assets wipes out 100% of your equity. You are bankrupt. When housing fell by 20%, Lehman wasn't just broke, they were a financial black hole. On the weekend of September 13, 2008, the masters of the universe gathered in the fortress of the New York Federal Reserve. The air conditioning was off. The smell of stale coffee and fear filled the room. Lehman Brothers was bleeding to death. Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson and Fed Chair Ben Bernanke tried to find a buyer. A British bank, Barclays, was interested, but at the last minute, British regulators refused to approve the deal. They didn't want to import America's cancer. The government made a choice. They had saved Bear Stearns months earlier, creating moral hazard, the belief that the government would always save the reckless. But with Lehman, Paulson decided to make an example. He let it fail. It was a miscalculation that almost ended Western civilization. On Monday morning, September 15th, Lehman filed for bankruptcy. The result was immediate chaos. But the real damage happened in a place most people don't look: the money markets. The Reserve Primary Fund was a boring, safe place where companies kept their cash. It was supposed to be as safe as a bank account, but the fund held $785 million in Lehman Brothers debt. When Lehman died, that debt became worthless. On September 16th, the Reserve Primary Fund broke the buck. Its value fell below $1 per share. Panic spread instantly. Investors pulled $140 billion out of money market funds in 2 days. This is what froze the world. The money market funds are the lifeblood of corporate America. Companies like General Electric and Toyota use short-term loans from these funds to pay their workers and buy parts. When the funds froze, GE couldn't make payroll. The supply chain of the entire planet locked up. Ships full of food and oil sat in harbors because the letters of credit wouldn't clear. With the system frozen, Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson, a former CEO of Goldman Sachs, went to Congress. He didn't ask for help. He demanded a blank check. The Troubled Asset Relief Program, or TARP, asked for $700 billion of taxpayer money to buy the toxic assets from the banks. It was a 3-page document with no oversight and no judicial review.
The idea was that we would present the program to them and ask them within a few hours to sign agreements where they would willingly take the capital, recognizing that they're doing this for the good of the country.
At first, the House of Representatives voted no. They listened to their angry constituents, but the market responded with violence. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 777 points in a single day, the largest point drop in history at the time. Panic set in. When Congress hesitated, the threats turned dark. Senator James Inhofe and others reported being told that if they didn't vote yes, the American economy would cease to exist by Monday morning. It was described as financial martial law. Congress voted again and passed the bill.
October 3rd, 2008. That was the day President George W. Bush signed the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act, a sweeping piece of legislation designed to inject capital into a reeling U.S. financial system. Now, the legislation's centerpiece was the $700 billion Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP. They used taxpayer money to hoover up billions of toxic debt held by banks, a clean sweep.
But here is the detail history books leave out. While Congress was fighting over $700 billion, the Federal Reserve was secretly printing trillions. They activated Section 13-3 of the Federal Reserve Act, a loophole allowing them to lend to non-banks in unusual and exigent circumstances. They used this to funnel over $16 trillion in secret loans to banks all over the world. They bailed out AIG with $180 billion, not to save the insurance company, but to make sure AIG could pay off its bets to Goldman Sachs and Societe Generale. It was a backdoor bailout for the banks. They saved the banks, but they didn't save the homeowners. The money was used for executive bonuses and acquiring smaller rivals. The trickle-down bailout never trickled down. You might be sitting there thinking, I have a 30-year fixed mortgage. I'm safe. You are wrong. The 2008 trap hasn't disappeared. It has just migrated. In 2008, the toxic asset was residential housing. Today, it is commercial real estate. And the mechanics are exactly the same. Most commercial loans for office towers and apartment complexes are not 30-year fixed loans. They are 5-year balloons. They act exactly like the 2008 adjustable mortgages. Every 5 years, the owner must refinance or pay off the entire debt. Right now, trillions of dollars in these commercial loans are hitting their expiration date. This is called the maturity wall. But interest rates have jumped from 0% to 5%. Just like the homeowner in 2008, the building owners cannot afford the new payment. And because the buildings are empty due to the work-from-home revolution, the value has crashed. A tower in San Francisco that sold for $300 million in 2019 recently sold for $60 million. They cannot refinance because the collateral is gone. This crisis sits on the balance sheets of regional banks, the small and mid-sized banks that hold 70% of all commercial real estate debt. These banks are currently pretending these zombie buildings are worth full price to avoid declaring bankruptcy. They call it extend and pretend. But the math is inevitable. The reset is coming. The 2008 crisis taught us that when the math breaks, the rules change. The only question left is, when the next bailout comes, will it be enough to save the dollar itself?